I told this story in a thread I posted yesterday, but I'll post it again. But before I do, I need to fill you in on the legend. So strap yourselves in, X. This is the legend of the Lost Lights. It all starts off in the mid-1800s. An expeditionary force of 25 men go exploring the mountain ranges of British Columbia. They're looking for a suitable place to start a mine. They're hiking up a mountain, and they make camp there for the night. That night, when one of them gets up to go relieve themselves, he trips and injures his leg in the dark. In the morning, it's decided that 12 men will help the injured man back down the mountain and back to civilization, while the rest of them, 12 altogether, continue on ahead. So the group splits up. 13 men go down, 12 men continue up the mountain. The second group hikes until evening, when one of the men notices that it's gotten considerably colder. Only minutes later, it begins to snow. One of the men expresses concern that they might get snowed in over the night. The others laugh it off. They joke and tease the man about being scared. As the evening turns into twilight, it gets colder and colder. The snow gets heavier and heavier. They've gone a ways up the mountain, so it's difficult and deadly if the storm gets worse. And the snow shows no signs of letting up. In fact, it was almost sure to become a monster of a storm. The 12 men faced a tough situation. They needed to get back down the mountain, or else they would freeze to death. So they left their tents, and they only took what was needed, and started back down the mountain in the raging storm. Each of the men lights his oil lamp, and they all take off down the mountain together. But because of the blizzard that ensued, none of the men could see the light of the man in front of him. The man who had noted the snow to begin with, a man named Jacob White, lost complete sight of all of the other lanterns. In fact, it seemed that all of them had lost sight of each other. They walked around aimlessly on the mountain, calling out, trying to find each other. Just when it couldn't get any worse, the wind picked up. Jacob knew he had to get down the mountain or he would die there. He stopped trying to find the others and went down the slope by himself, slowly making his way down until he managed to reach the base of the mountain. When he reached the base, Jacob ran to find the 13 other men that were already headed back. He needed their help in rescuing his comrades, but he just couldn't make it any further. The storm had spread to the bottom of the mountain and across the valley. So he found a nearby cave where he decided he would spend the night. And as the night progressed, he watched the lights of his fellow expeditionaries wandering out there endlessly across the mountain in the terrible snowstorm. Throughout the night, he watched them, and he saw when the first light went out and disappeared sometime around midnight. The other lights followed over the next hours. One by one, they extinguished. Jacob hoped and prayed that at least one light would last the night, but the last one went out 3 hours after the first one did. All hope was lost. In the morning, when the storm cleared, Jacob headed further down into the valley to find the other 13 men that had gone back earlier the previous day. When he found them, there were only 2 left alive. The rest had died in the storm that swept down from the mountain. The survivors exchanged stories. The 2 men told Jacob that they had seen the wandering lights up on the mountainside. The 2 men only found out in the morning that 11 of their own men had died in the night from the cold. 3 weeks later, an expeditionary force of 20 men, including Jacob White, returned to recover anything they can of those who died in the storm. They found the remains of the 11 men in the valley easily enough. They recovered their personal effects and what little bone they could find to bring back to their families. But the bodies of the men who died up on the mountain? There was no sign of them. They found nothing. The men were gone without a trace. They searched until dusk, and then the air got colder and a light snow began to fall, just like on the night when Jacob's comrades met their end. So the men hightailed it down the mountain and into the valley, where they decided to make camp for the night. Then the storm came down from the mountain and into the valley, just like the night when Jacob lost his comrades. It got colder and colder in the valley as the storm continued to barrel down from the mountain. That night, Jacob and the men saw something that they could not quite believe. They saw the lights wandering up on the blizzarding mountainside. They watched from their individual tents throughout the night as one by one the wandering lights went out. Jacob knew it must be the spirits of his friends, and he wondered why he only saw 10 lights when it was 11 who had died and disappeared. Could it be that one of the men had survived? that one of his friends was still alive, somewhere out there, lost in the wilderness? Where was that last missing 11th light? Why wasn't it up there on the mountain? The answers came in the morning, when Jacob woke up and the storm had cleared. Jacob and the 9 other men stepped out of their tents. 9 other men. 10 men had died from the cold that night. They must have died one by one, snuffed out by the cold, snuffed out like the 10 lights up on the mountainside. And now, X, it's time for me to share my personal experience with the lost lights. Be me, 35, have 3 teenage boys. I decide to go hiking with my sons and my buddy and his 2 sons. We drive out to the edge of the wilderness at 4 a.m., park the car, and start hiking at 4:30. We hike all day, only stopping at noon for a quick lunch. We're walking at a decent pace. We reach the middle of a valley in the evening. We decide to camp there for the night. We have a quick dinner, and everyone goes to sleep quickly because we're all tired from the hike. Everyone goes to bed, but me. I decide to stay up and drink some beers and relax in a fold-out chair I brought. I sit there staring at the mountain range where the sun has just set. It gets pretty cold out there after the sun sets. I put on my jacket. Then the fireflies came out. They danced slowly across the shape of the mountain. These fireflies were pretty weird. They didn't leave the shape of the mountain, and they didn't flash like normal fireflies. And then it hits me. Holy shit. Immediately I jump out of my chair and wake everyone else up. I tell everyone to pack up their stuff. We've got to move now. My buddy asks, "What's wrong? What happened?" I say, "I saw them." My buddy asks, "Saw what?" I say, "The lost lights." My buddy looks over my shoulder and sees the lights up on the mountainside. He notices how cold it's gotten, so he rushes to pack everything up with the kids, and we hike back down as fast as we can. The boys had overheard what me and my buddy were saying. One of them asks, "Dad, what are the lost lights? Why are we leaving right now? Can't we leave in the morning?" "No," I said, and I proceeded to tell them the story of the lost lights as we hiked back. At around 2:30 a.m., we managed to get back to the car and hightailed it out of there. I dropped my buddy off, and me and my kids go home. I woke up at noon later that day and found out from the weather station there was a huge snowstorm that swept the valley we were in last night. Here comes the really scary part, X. I saw 7 lights up on the mountainside. There were 7 of us on that trip. Anyway, X, that's my experience with the lost lights.